This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
That's John Cameron. Tonight we're talking Javier Milei a year after Argentina. But first, Richard Fields has something to say about Doge, and then I think John has a rant. So first, let's hear from Mr. Richard Fields this week.
I don't rant.
Hi, I'm Richard Fields with this week's Report from the Fields, reporting on Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency. What a great idea. Like Theodore Roosevelt's KEEP Commission, the Grace Commission on government waste under Reagan, Clinton's Reinventing Government, Al Gore's Partnership for Reinventing Government, George W. Bush's President's Management Agenda, Vice President Joe Biden's campaign to cut waste, or countless GAO reports. With minor exceptions, they all produced great ideas that got printed up, but the only result was a waste of the paper they were printed on. Will Doge be different? Maybe. Elon Musk is reputed to be someone who works 20 hours a day with a near 100% signal-to-noise ratio, meaning that he's hyper-focused on the task at hand all the time. He bought Twitter, cut its workforce by some 80%, while improving how well it functioned. His partner, Vivek Ramaswamy, campaigning for president, proposed cutting the federal workforce by 75%. They have a great model to follow in Javier Milei of Argentina, who cut government agencies in that country in half and otherwise slashed public welfare and infrastructure spending. They will be able to cut billions in low-hanging fruit at the various regulatory agencies. Cutting regulatory spending and the regulations the bureaucrats are enforcing will produce salutary effects in economic growth. After 1 year of chainsaw budget cuts in Argentina, Milei was able to tame inflation, produce the first federal budget surplus in decades, and turn the economy from deep recession to growth. It could happen here. But like in Argentina, it will require cutting the so-called mandatory areas of federal spending. Musk wants to cut $2 trillion in federal spending. The grand total of all discretionary spending is only $1.7 trillion. So if Doge cuts all discretionary spending, defense, all the regulatory agencies, the court system, all the intelligence agencies, everything, including the space program, which Musk benefits from, he would still have $300 billion to go. Since the U.S. spends 6 times as much on defense as the next half dozen biggest spenders combined, we could probably cut defense spending by 80% and still be safe from foreign aggression. That means we'd still need $160 billion for defense. In a libertarian wet dream world where Congress quitters work for free and all the regulatory agencies are done away with, we'd still need to spend a little bit more to keep the court system and other essential services functional. So $300 billion plus $160 billion plus, say, another $40 billion adds up to about $500 billion that would have to come out of mandatory spending. That's mainly Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Spread out over a population of 346 million people, that means on average we'd each need to give up about $1,500 of the federal benefits we've grown accustomed to each year. I'm ready. Are you? I'm Richard Fields, and that's this week's Report from the Fields. See you again next week, and Happy New Year.
So, John, Doge, the overexpansion of government has been a huge problem really across the world, not just in the United States, as we'll discuss a little bit later here in Argentina. But there's always the pushback, right? You sent me an article about, if Doge treats government like a business, it could be a disaster. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a disaster for, the political establishment, the bureaucratic establishment, mm-hmm. the technocracy, whatever you want to call it.
Cacocracy, yeah. Pathocracy, all the ocracies.
Technocracy? Yeah, that's a word I can't. Yeah. So one of those words I can't speak tonight, so we're going to...
Well, I'm going to see if I can... I take the New York Times just to see, if the left might actually come around to reason and look at history and learn how to read a balance sheet and an income statement. And there was a guest op-ed from an economics professor who said that, you know, basically government is very complex. It's way more complex and much harder than business. And it gave the example of somebody making a window or something, and said the guy goes out and he puts in a window, and you know, it's easy, right? And that's it. But in government, you have, and the example he gave was combating terrorism. And he said the only way you know if it works is if nothing happens, and then you know it worked. So you can't really hold people accountable because they have to react instantly to something, and the CIA and the NSA and the FBI and all the rest of these people have to, you know, they can't have, basically, this stuff has to happen behind doors for national security, and it basically has inefficiency built in, and it has to, in order to operate effectively, so people can just, you know, at the drop of a hat, put resources where they need to be, and they've got to have those resources. Anyway, it was a garbage explanation. Obviously, the guy has never run a business. Business is way more complex than government, because you have to actually deliver, you have to hit a budget, you have to you know, pay wages that you can afford. I mean, the list of all the requirements placed upon a business to survive, you put 3 on them on any government agency, and they, you know, just have a little hissy fit and stop. So basically, if you look at our government now, its stated purpose is, like the guy said, inefficiency. And they don't call what they do corruption and graft, but it's basically punishing their enemies and paying off their friends with tax dollars or money they print. So, you know, good luck to these guys.
All right, John, I told you had a rant, but we're gonna move
It's
on.
not a rant. That was a reasoned statement. A rant, I raised my voice.
I told you guys John was gonna have a rant on this thing, so I am right yet again. Hey guys, if you could bring up graphic number 1 for me, please. Argentina. We were talking about Javier Milei. We're talking about cutting of government. We're talking about the over impact of government in our lives, right? And Javier Milei has now been the president of Argentina for a little over a year, like a year and a month by the time this airs, I think it will be. And a lot has changed since then. You know, Javier Milei's only been a politician for 3 years.
Yeah.
That's it, for 3 years. And in those 3 years, right, it was the 1,000% inflation a year? It was 1,700%. It was
I think
insane.
the stated rate of inflation was 212%, but it was way worse than that.
Yeah, it was like 1,700% in one of these articles that we sent around.
Yeah.
And you know, there was the economic hardship. You had the culture hardship, because you had imposed culture. You had cultures imposing. You had the regulatory hardship. You know, they had some of the most, despite the mass poverty, they were having some of the most expensive housing in South America because of all the housing restrictions. The
worse than Sacramento?
Rent control, worse than San Francisco, right? That's how bad these kind of things were.
It's not possible.
Well, unfortunately, it's not. And right, you had long lives, empty shelves, you know, political protests, because people were not just unhappy, they were
going hungry.
They had lost hope.
Yeah.
They had lost hope. And that is one of these things that I have personally getting to have discussions with people from Argentina, you know, whether they are skeptical of Milei or whether they are fully supportive of him, everyone now has at least a ray of hope. And that is something new. Can we see graphic number 2, please? And so, you know, Milei was, as we said, an outsider. He's only been in office for 3 years, and it's his ideals of, he is really a libertarian, right? He calls himself a anarcho-capitalist, right? So he understands that the state is an oppressive machine, a destroyer of rights. He understands that taxes are theft, and the state is like an organized criminal gang. That is his political philosophy. That is what everything he bases. That's the fundamental truth from what libertarians believe the government is, right?
Yeah, and he says, I'm not a politician. I'm an anarcho-capitalist, and politicians go into power, or go into politics for power and gain. And I'm here to remove political power from people so that they can't gain. I'm here to take away the government telling people what to do, and take away all the ministries and agencies and rules and regulations. And there's a great video on Spectator News of him in an interview, just having a whiteboard up and going down the whiteboard and pulling off these the names of these government agencies, like the Cultural Ministry, gone, closed. The Ministry of Export and Import, gone, closed, and just chainsaw. And I think he actually stole the chainsaw. There was an American businessman about 30 years ago who was known as Chainsaw, and he did that with failed businesses. He'd go in and just cut them to the bone, and they survive. And sometimes you have to cut them to the bone to get them to survive.
Yeah, and let's be clear. Milei did not make any false promises. Unlike other, he said it's going to be hard for a while, but we have no choice. If we want a future, this is the medicine we're going to have to take now. Yeah. And I think that's part of the reason his popularity has slightly increased. He's now at 54% popularity rating, and 3-4 months ago it was actually at 44%, because finally the tide is starting to turn. The economic tide is starting to turn.
Very unusual for a politician that comes into power. They call him a populist. What populism basically is, folks, is democracy. People vote for the person they want. That's populism. Popular vote populism. He came in and he wasn't, even though he won, he didn't win a significant percentage of the vote. I don't even think he actually won a majority of the vote, but he won enough. And his party, whatever it's called, Libertarian Party, I guess, doesn't have a lot of power. They have to do these deals behind closed doors, because he couldn't put everything in that he wanted to do. And but he put a lot of things in, and we want to talk now about results, or we want to talk about process?
Well, let's see what's on graphic number 3.
Okay.
Because I think we've got his economic reforms, right? His first reforms were budget cuts. He literally slashed the budget, as John just talked about. He just took a chainsaw to it. No, you're gone. No, you're gone. No, you're gone. He's aiming to eliminate 90% of existing taxes, focus on VAT and income tax, abolish export taxes. He wants to completely reframe how people are paying your taxes. Simplified so you can understand it, and so you can, and predictable, not just low taxes are one thing, but predictability is another thing that people don't talk about. We can actually plan for the next 3 years where taxes are going to be relatively stable, unlike here in California where every 6 months taxes get raised, right? On something else, or the tax changes.
It feels more often. You sure it's every 6 months?
No, I'm being nice, John.
Okay.
I'm in a good mood. We're talking about...
It's Christmas.
It's Christmas, and we're actually talking about, John, for the first time in the history of the world, essentially, the modern humanity, we have an actual libertarian running things. I mean, on a national scale, not just some small-time mayor who comes in and turns around a bankrupt town. We're talking about someone who's doing that on a national level, while the whole world is watching.
And many of them are pulling against him. And his plan was to eliminate 90% of the taxes and simplify the tax code. They had 162 taxes, and I think his goal was to get to 20?
22. Like if memory serves, it was 22. And again, this is part of the thing. Market deregulation. First thing he started with was rent control. Got rid of rent control. And then he got rid of business regulation, so people could start actually getting businesses.
You mean get an entrepreneurial spirit back? You mean like they had 124
years ago?
Well, like they had when Perón took power. Argentina, I think, was the second richest country by per capita in South America, on par or very close to the United States. Had a booming economy, culture, arts. Not just Eva singing, there was other things, and after Perón took over, disaster, similar to Venezuela, maybe not as bad. Venezuela actually had the highest standard of living in the world for a while, until the socialists took over. And now they're, eating zoo animals.
Yeah, and for the first time in 123 years, they have a budget surplus.
Within 1 year.
Within 1 year, he created a budget surplus.
And it was painful. It's going to be painful here when we start cutting Social Security, Veterans Administration, Medicaid, Medicare, all that stuff. It's going to be painful. But it needs to be done. Nobody's willing to talk about it here yet. But it's going to run out of money in 10 years.
Yeah.
They're automatically it's going to be reduced by 20% initially if they don't do something about it. And it's going to hurt because people are depending on that. They didn't plan well because they thought they knew that money would be there. They didn't realize the government would actually spend it.
Yeah, well, they thought they were planning, right?
What?
They thought Social Security was the plan, or at least part of the plan, or a big chunk of the plan.
Yeah.
And they've been lied to, right? They've been lied that this is in a lockbox, you'll get it. There is no lockbox. They stole and spent your money a long time ago.
The lockbox is there, but what it has in it is IOUs. That's like going to the bank to withdraw cash, and they go into the vault and say, "Oh no, I can't give you cash today. I'm going to give you this IOU."
It's an IOU written in crayon. It's not even a serious. It's not even a serious.
We're getting off track. We want to talk about
it's not even serious IOU. All right, can we see the next clip? What is it? Clip 4? I mean, the graphic 4. I think we're on. Or am I on graphic 5? Whichever one happens to be next, guys. Thank you. And so it's been a kind of mixed economics results, right? We talked about the budget surplus, the first budget surplus in over a decade. Actually, it's over 123 years. We got inflation has dropped significantly. It was 54% monthly a year ago, and now it's down to 1.2%.
1.2.
And it's actually in the last couple of months, it's actually gone down below that.
Yeah.
It's now, he says, it's about 2.5% per year.
Yeah.
It's right down to about normal.
Yeah.
They've almost reached investment grade.
Can I throw in some more positive numbers? Okay. So right now, Argentina has the people on the left are predicting that they'll have negative growth in Argentina next year. Morgan Stanley is predicting 8.5% growth in the country. Javier, I like to call him Javier when we're sitting around having a cigar and eating a steak, doesn't predict. He lets other people predict, and they predict 8.5%, right? So that's amazing. Right now, Argentina has CCC rated debt, basically junk bonds.
Yeah, which is good for them. Which is for them is a huge improvement.
It's gone. I don't think there's a Z rated, but if there was, they'd be a Z rated. It's gone to CCC, which is a junk bond status, but at least they're paying their bills, right? They're paying the debt they owe. He predicts that within another year, Argentinian debt will be investment grade. Investment grade is what we have in the States, laughingly, but we do. Bonds that you can count on, bonds that normal countries have, not the mess they had in Argentina. And this is all within a year. Now the negatives, you want to talk about the negatives?
Well, the negatives, negatives are an interesting thing. Whether there's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. And this is part of the negative, right? They say poverty rate has increased, but that's kind of how you calculate poverty rate. Right?
One bunch of crazy lefties said that poverty's increased by 50%. Objective international observers say it's dropped by 2%.
Yeah,
so it depends on what you listen to. Because,
it's what you listen to.
Just a crazy statistic to show you how crazy statistics can be. CNN says that there was 93 school shootings this year so far. 93, and basically it depends on how you define a school shooting, and apparently the way CNN defines it, there was 93 of them.
Yeah, anyway. and again, how you define poverty, right? Now, some of his plans we talked about, hasn't been able to get through his Congress because he doesn't have the.
And some of the things he couldn't do, and people got mad about him, is currency controls. And he said if he would have put currency control, if he would have taken off currency controls, inflation would have been 1,000% in a month, and he'd have been thrown out of office within a month. So he has to get to the point where it can take currency controls off.
Yeah.
And the way the country's going, there are people waiting on the sidelines to make sure that the commies, in essence, the socialists, don't stage a revolution to throw him out. But once he shows another year of this, international investors are going to be all over Argentina because they're hardworking, well-educated people, despite the attempts of the socialist government.
They're prosperous people despite all the problems they've had.
And they're sitting on huge shale oil resources, and they have some of the most productive farming and ranching in the world when they're left alone to do it.
So he's actually a pragmatic leader, is what he really is.
Yeah.
He looks at he's looking to say, yes, theoretically, removing price control, removing currency controls is a good thing. Eventually, we'll get there to the point where it's not going to cause catastrophic.
Yeah.
And the biggest issue has the trade unions are protesting, right?
I'm shocked by that.
A lot of them lost their jobs with that chainsaw, right?
Yeah.
That's what happened, and that's what they're protesting. They're protesting the fact that their gravy train has ended.
Yeah.
And that's the really protest. Can we see the next graphic, please? So again, his weapons policy. Another thing we've wanted to talk about, John. His individual freedom, and one of the ways you can think about individual freedom is your right to protect yourself.
Well, we have it spelled out in our Constitution in this country. I think we might be the only country on the planet that does have it spelled out in their Constitution, the right to bear arms.
But he is sending it on that direction. He's taking steps to deregulate gun ownership in Argentina. He's reducing the minimum age from 21 to 18. So if you get drafted to the military, you can own a
Well, you
weapon.
can vote. I think you can vote in Argentina at 16, which I read somewhere. That seems crazy to me, but apparently some of his biggest support is from youth.
From the young, yeah. So he's pushing for laws to further facilitate access to firearms. So he's trying to free people to take care of themselves.
There's only 1 million registered firearms in the country, and I think there's something like 50 million people or something.
Something like that, yeah.
So it's not like here, where there's more than one firearm for every person. But one of the reasons the stormtroopers aren't kicking the doors in here is because they get shot. So there, you first take away the gun and then you kick the doors in. So once the populace is a little better armed, then the ability of the control freaks to take over will be lessened. There'll be more risk to them doing that.
I mean, there is some concerns. This is kind of the generic concerns about, the potential increase in violence from young men. But if young men have something to do, young men don't become violent.
If they're allowed to do something. And crime has dropped significantly since he's come into office. And if all that increase in poverty is there, and everybody hates it, because there's all these polls out that show him failing miserably to gain, more people dislike him according to some of the polls than are actually in Argentina. So you can't trust all the polls.
All right, John, we're going to have to move on. Can we get the next? So it's changing foreign policy. We're going to breeze through this one. He's increasing the ties with the United he's close to Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and other capitalists here in the United States. He's got an alignment with Israel, right? Argentina has been, we'll call it standoffish, right? They've not even been anti-Israel, but they've been
probably because one of the plans was to create Israel in Argentina, so that fell through.
And his dispute over the Maldives, or the Falkland Islands, as we would know it, he does still believe that they should belong to Argentina, but we'll resolve that diplomatically.
And he said, I got elected on some promises I made. And one of those promises was to try to, through legal diplomatic means, get the Malvinas back. So I made a promise, I'm trying to keep it. And he almost winked at the camera when he said that, like, I made the promise, I got to keep it, but...
we all know the reality. It's going to be a long time before we can convince Britain to give those islands
since
back.
92% of the people on the Malvinas want to be under British rule, it's going to be kind of hard.
Well, but at some point, the way the British Isles are going, they're not going to be able to afford to keep the Falklands. And that's going to be the ultimate decider. Can we move on to the next one? We're going to talk hope now, John. Well, actually, we're going to go ahead and pass that. Let's cover it real quick. His opponents, right? They complain about his aggressive language, which coming from the left is hilarious. He protests and repression. These guys are protesting. He's actually not letting them destroy and burn things down, so they're mad about that. And they're mad about the cultural and social impact of all that cutting of departments, of like the Department of Culture and all these various departments that were really just left-wing enshrinement vehicles.
And the scientific research, we've had some scientific research here. As a matter of fact, we gave the Chinese lab American money to do scientific research. You know how well that worked out.
All right, guys. So now there's some hope. I want to leave us with some hope. We have some clips from that interview.
There's a lot
we have
of
some
hope.
clips.
The battle for freedom is relentless, President Milei. How do you wind down?
¿Relaja? ¿Qué es eso? No me relajo nunca. Digamos, trabajo todo el día prácticamente. Es más, de hecho, a mí me gusta trabajar mucho más en Olivos porque me levanto a las 6 de la mañana, me baño y a las 7 de la mañana ya estoy en el escritorio trabajando hasta las 11 de la noche. Disfruto mi trabajo. Disfruto de cortar el gasto público. Amo la motosierra. Filosófico, soy, digamos, claramente un anarcocapitalista y, digamos, y después la discusión, digamos, se vuelve acerca de las restricciones que uno puede tener que estar enfrentando, que hace que lo alejen de su ideal o no. Digamos, en general a mí me gusta mucho cuando tengo la posibilidad de charlar con otros líderes, es tratar de internalizar las restricciones que enfrentan. Mirando los tweets del ministro Sturzenegger desregulando. Es más, le voy a contar una anécdota que le va a resultar divertida. Entonces le digo que el ministro Sturzenegger quita entre 1 y 5 regulaciones por día. Y le digo, y hoy, digamos, quitó 4. Y lo más interesante, creo que el ministro Sturzenegger no me corrigió, porque si yo hubiera sabido bien el número, probablemente me hubiera puesto a festejar arriba de la mesa. Porque no había quitado 4 regulaciones, había quitado 44. Es decir, le puedo asegurar que si me hacía la corrección, yo me ponía de pie, iba y le daba un abrazo a mi ministro, porque, digamos, o sea, era un nivel de alegría que me resultaba hasta difícil de asimilar. Eliminar 44 regulaciones en el día es un placer indescriptible. Le voy a contar otra anécdota. Hay un consultor muy popular que dice que efectivamente él cree, digamos, en mi compromiso con el equilibrio fiscal. Le dicen, ¿por qué? Porque disfruta de cortar el gasto público. O sea, a mí me encanta. Yo experimento placer recortando el gasto público, sacando el Estado del medio. Entonces, o sea, ¿por qué? Porque siento que somos más libres, que le estoy devolviendo la libertad a la gente. Y no es que la libertad es buena cuando estoy del otro lado del mostrador y quiero ser libre. No, cuando estoy de este lado, opero como si fuera un topo adentro del Estado.
This is Gail Morgan thanking you for watching the Libertarian Counterpoint each Thursday at 8 p.m., Channel 17 on Comcast, on YouTube, and on Facebook. We invite you to come again next week for the Libertarian Counterpoint.